All right, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us for our afternoon session. We're excited about the panel that we have before you. I wanted to do one more shameless plug, so you'll have to stay with me for 60 seconds. Have any of you ever heard of LEAD New York? Handful of folks. If you are a LEAD New York alumni, will you raise your hand? Big, that's a lot of folks in the room. How about the current LEAD class? Can you guys stand up? Now I'm going to tell you, because if you're not all here, Larry's going to know. You're in trouble. Yeah. Well, here's our current LEAD class. Let's give them a round of applause. Excited to have them there. So we don't need to spend a lot of time on the influence and impact that LEAD New York has had on the Ag Society and the agricultural community. I am lucky enough to be a LEAD graduate. I've had some other LEAD folks I know say that their class was the best. We know that's wrong. We know that class 15 is the best, correct? Yes, thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Again, just a shout out to LEAD for those folks. Continue to support that program. That program has done a lot for not only the Ag Society, but the Ag community. I wanted to introduce the host of our afternoon panel, somebody that you guys have not met yet today. His name is Patrick Hooker. Anybody heard of him? We are lucky to have Pat, our distinguished service citation winner, based on his experience in New York State, work through this panel with us this afternoon. We're excited to have Tristan Brown, Tinia Pina, and Stephanie Castle join our panel. Without further ado, Patrick.
All right, thank you, Mark. Hi, everybody. I'm having deja vu. You may be having PSD, I'm not sure. Great to be here with you. I am certainly no Ben Holton, but I am very glad to support and help the Ag Society, and I've been asked to just sort of tee this up. It's very interesting in talking with our panelists just a little bit earlier and reflecting on them and their bios, which I'm going to share with you just a second. You know, you wouldn't automatically see the continuity between all of these people, but when we talk about Ag's decarbonization opportunities, I think you'll quickly be able to put the pieces together for the great breadth and depth of the possibilities here for us. So I want to start immediately on my right with Tristan Brown, an associate professor of energy resource economics, director of the Bioeconomy Development Institute at SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry. He's a member of the New York Climate Action Council's Energy Intensive and Trade Exposed Industries Advisory Panel and Bioenergy Subgroup. In the latter role, he was closely involved in the drafting of multiple policy recommendations involving carbon sequestration by the agriculture and forestry sectors that are being considered by the Climate Action Council. His academic research focuses on the design and analysis of policies that are intended to support the deployment and scale-up of the advanced bioeconomy in the Northeast U.S. So number two in the middle, Stephanie Castle of American Farmland Trust, leads the Women for the Land Initiative in New York and assists with the Genesee River Watershed Demo Farm Network, a partnership with 13 farm operations to support the adoption of regenerative farming practices in Western New York. AFT collaborators include the USD Natural Resources Conservation Service, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and the New York Farm Viability Institute. And on the end, we have Renewable founder Tinia Pina, who has a BS in Business Information Technology from the Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. She began her career in sustainability as a former student, pursuing a Master's of Science degree at Columbia University prior to becoming the CEO and founder of Re-Nuble, Inc., an agricultural technology company headquartered in New York City. A strong advocate for sustainable waste management and regenerative agriculture, she has been involved in management and business development roles with the sustainability industry for 10 years. So in a minute, I'm going to turn the microphone over to each of our three panelists who have some slides to go through with you, and then we'll start some dialogue and go through some questions. I encourage all of you, though, to think of questions you have. We have time. I want to make sure that you get your voice heard. We got a little bit jammed up for time this morning with AG, but pretty fascinating talk that he had for us, too. The Clcpa are letters that have come up. a lot today. They're going to come up a lot in our discussion here too, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. So again, and echoing Rick Zimmerman earlier this morning after the presentation that we had from Suzanne and Brian, you know, we're at that point now where the Climate Action Council has done a lot of work. And I was not on the council myself, but I was in state government for a period of time when it was stood up, and I can tell you that the Department of Ag and Markets and the industry, I was very proud of all of them for the work, and there are so many voices at that table and so many possible ways that this can go. And so I think the general admonition from Rick earlier is smart for all of us in our organizations to focus on this right now, because there's a sort of a finite period of time that we can really work on this with the draft scoping plan out and on the table here in the last week, and we're in that real comment period. In my newfound private life, I'm on the board of my local electric cooperative, and I think we're going to have a few opinions about all of this too. It's just, there is, and there's nothing, you know, no negatives here. It's really how do we all, as the real people working in this space, how do we reflect on each of these ideas and say this will work, this might not work, this might take longer, this is low-hanging fruit, this is not. But the whole focus in this area is very significant. Congress held a record 187 hearings on energy, environment, climate, et cetera last year. This is, once we get past the daily virus updates, this is the topic that we are in for the foreseeable future. Ben Holton, of course, the dean of the college, wasn't able to be here, but I reached out to Ben and just had a quick exchange with him just to try to see if I could share some of his thoughts. Some of you may know he is a world-known climatologist, researcher in this whole area. You saw that he won an award earlier today for him reaching out to Congress and saying this has to be sorted out in a way that's meaningful and helpful to agriculture. I know a lot of us that have looked at this think that there's some pretty interesting possibilities for us in the industry of agriculture. We're used to selling a certain amount of commodities, but there may be a whole lot more that we can help with in society. But I think if Ben were sitting here, he would have reflected on the recently concluded Glasgow climate change conference that occurred here, and you've all heard of the Paris Agreement. But he said really his three takeaways from that at the highest level were that the focus overall was on land use and forest protection, particularly in the Amazon. There's a lot of new ambitions in carbon dioxide renewal, and I don't know if that extends to full commitments, but maybe our panelists can touch on that. And there's a really explicit focus on reducing methane. He also pointed me toward the 16 points that the U.S.-China group put together, and as you think about the largest countries in the world and the most industrialized ones, there's a lot to do with these two countries, and what is it that we can agree on between the U.S. and China. And the 16 points they came up with, I just pulled a few of them out, but in general the themes seem to be greenhouse gas reduction. They want to maximize societal benefits of the clean energy transition, policies to decarbonize and electrification, green design and renewable resource utilization, and then technologies such as CCUS, which I had to look up, carbon capture, utilization and storage, and direct air capture. Clearly there's a focus on methane, and there is a lot of reliance and faith in what had already been done with the Paris Agreement. Ann and I talked a little bit when I was to step in here, and she thought it might be, helpful to just reflect a little bit on New York State and how maybe we got to such a, how did New York State push the envelope on something like the Clcpa? And it's always been something that I've been involved with a little bit more on the edges, but in terms of the act, but not in terms of, where does agriculture fit in this whole climate discussion. And so, you know, how did New York State get to here? And of course, there's probably a lot of people who have different perspectives. But as I sat in the governor's office, I would say the very first thing that really woke the governor up was Hurricane Irene and Lee. Whether that was, I don't know if any of us will ever know if that was precisely climate change, although apparently erratic weather is certainly one of the symptoms. But I can tell you that he directed his team, principally his environmental team, of course, many other people in terms of resiliency and so on. But, you know, what the heck was that just happened to us 10 years ago? How do you get a 500-year storm in, you know, 2 years? And so I think it was a bit of a shock that we got into this. And the governor's environment team, just like his agricultural team, you know, or his transportation team, they believe in their subject matter. And the leadership of the governor's environment team came from preeminent environmental organizations, you know, good academic credentials. They believe that climate change was real. We are a big state. There is a lot of money here. There are a lot of staff resources available. There is the ability to research and conceive different ideas. So they went to town, and they really dug into that, and they briefed the governor plenty of times, developed this strategy. He took it seriously. It continues to be taken seriously, you know, by our both houses of our legislature. I think you also have to realize, and we sort of take it for granted, I think, a little bit here in New York, how big New York State is compared to other states, frankly, compared to most other countries in the world. It's a big place. And so New York State politicians, New York State governors, New York State itself perceive ourselves as leaders, not followers. We do not want to be, you know, the second to drop the press release. We want to be the first to drop the press release. So this issue in a state like New York, with a predisposition to lead, was great politics. You know, we want to be the first, the highest, the fastest, the most. And when I saw this conversation occurring, you know, without any immediate facts on my part, I knew that the consequences for climate change at the time were going to be huge for agriculture. They obviously were in the storms that we had, but I wanted to know what could we do as a state to help agriculture be ready for climate change, but also to begin to explore what agriculture could do for society. So the programming and the resources that Brian articulated this morning was something that we just sort of in agriculture elbowed our way to the table and said, you know, as we're, you know, coming up with strategies to become more resilient and to mitigate this situation, agriculture needs to have a seat at the table. And I think you could see by all the work Commissioner Ball and his team is doing, they're getting there. So I think it's a short throw to see when you see the Paris Agreement. The White House then has their net zero target that they have put out, and the New York Clcpa. I think you will see continuity, I think, between all of that. And so that's just maybe too long of a summary, but I think it's just a quick stage setting on my part about where Ben thought things were at a global level, and very briefly where I think things are at this level. So we now have some slides from our panelists, and I want them to be able to reintroduce themselves and go through the material that they have. And the first ones up in the computer are Tristan. So over to you, sir.
Thank you. Afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to start off by just giving a very brief overview of why it is we're talking decarbonization in the ag sector, and then showing what exactly it is that we're looking at in New York State's ag sector specifically. The reason we keep referring to the Clcpa is because this is going to change just about every aspect of life in New York State over the next 30 years. And I don't think people necessarily have recognized that yet. And so I just want to show you some of the options that are being considered right now for what that future is going to look like. So just to get it started, why are we talking about decarbonization with the ag sector? Well, the short answer is because we are out of time. When it comes to the greenhouse gas emissions that have been emitted in the past, what those greenhouse gas emissions are going to have to look like in the near future, this is a slide from the latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change assessment report. Came out last August. The full version's coming out in stages right now as we speak. But what this is really showing is where greenhouse gas emissions are going to have to go over the next just a couple of decades in order to stay below 2 degrees Celsius increase to global temperatures. And there's a couple of things that stand out here. The first, this big picture here, this big figure, this is showing that it is not enough to get to zero, right? We've heard for a long time now we have to completely decarbonize. We need 100% reduction. What the IPCC has determined is that we now have to go net negative. By mid-century, we need to be sequestering more CO2 every year than we emit. By the end of the century, we need to be sequestering approximately 50% of the amount of CO2 compared to what we are currently emitting every single year. So this is going to be a tremendous amount of CO2 that we're going to have to sequester. And we have to do that if we want to have any probability of staying below a 2 degrees Celsius change, which is the threshold that climate scientists are in broad agreement on. Above 2 degrees Celsius is where you have the onset of catastrophic climate changes, when things start to get quite destructive. The other important thing, though, if you look at that figure on the top right, showing methane emissions. What's going to happen to methane specifically? Obviously, ag has a close relationship with methane in a lot of different ways. We are going to have to reduce methane emissions by 50% worldwide by mid-century. By the end of the century, we need to reduce our methane emissions by approximately 75%. And the reason for this is methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. So this is where the direction we're going, right? This is what's going to have to change. And I've been in this field for about 12 years now. 12 years ago, we were saying we were out of time. We are certainly out of time now, right? These are going to be very, very rapid changes that are going to have to occur. Here in New York, we tend to think ag's not going to be a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore the opportunities for ag are going to be relatively limited. And the main reason we frequently hear this is if you look at the different economic sectors in New York State, ag's greenhouse gas emissions are allocated at approximately 6% of the total, which makes it seem like ag doesn't have much of a role to play. But this is misleading for a couple of different reasons. The first one is you'll note the biggest square in there is buildings. Well, building energy is something that the agricultural sector can contribute to in terms of decarbonization. Here in New York State, especially now with the rollout of the 5% bioheat mandate statewide, right, following up on the bioheat mandate downstate, that is primarily being supplied via agriculture. Not a lot of people realize that, but that's going to be one of the biggest ways that we reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the building sector in the next 12 months. The transportation sector, 28%. Well, this is all of the fuel that is being used by the agriculture sector. And so even though it's not being allocated to the agriculture sector, that's going to be an important one. Same with electricity. That's electricity being used by the agricultural sector. And so ultimately, right, this is going to be something where the agricultural sector, even though it looks like it's a small contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, it is going to be directly impacted by everything we do in the state to reduce statewide greenhouse gas emissions. Well, the Clcpa scoping plan came out last week, and it's 800 pages long, so I doubt anyone's actually read through the entire thing. But as people are digesting it, we're quickly seeing, right, there's a lot in there that is going to show us what the next 30 years in New York State look like and what it's going to look like for ag. And it's really coalesced around one of two different options. Okay, and I'm not saying that it's going to be an either-or scenario. There's probably going to be a mix of both. But we're seeing, right, all the different forces in New York State are pushing or pulling one way or another. One of those options is what's being termed the strategic use of low-carbon fuels. This is a scenario that will see agriculture not just reduce its greenhouse gas emissions, but directly contribute to the reduction of statewide greenhouse gas emissions. This is where agriculture is going to be a critical player in terms of coming up with new products, in terms of developing new technologies. So this is where we see, I've highlighted a few different of the aspects that we want to focus on, but there are really two big ones. The first one you'll see in here, it says by 2030, we'll be using 75% renewable distillates. Works out to about 1.7 billion gallons of renewable distillates every year. There is one place in the entire world that has successfully done something along that volume, and that's California. And that is primarily being supplied by the agricultural sector. So that is an important one if that were to go into play. The second one up there, you'll see 9% blend of RNG and pipeline. That's renewable natural gas. This is going to be coming from anaerobic digesters. This is going to be things like manure lagoons. This is going to be a lot of the different waste products that are produced by the agricultural sector. This is going to be converting those into value-added products and then directly replacing a fossil fuel, natural gas, with those. And then as you continue on all the way out through 2050, right, we see, it's expanding these different aspects, expanding the products, agricultural products we'll be utilizing to decarbonize. And then the bottom right over there, there's one that says NETs. Those are negative emission technologies. This is that net sequestration I was referring to just a few minutes ago. This is where the agricultural sector, and this is primarily going to be focused on the agricultural sector in the near term, it's what's termed a climate-based solution or a nature-based solution, is going to be pulling more CO2 out of the atmosphere than is emitted. And so you see a negative number there, right? Ultimately showing negative 26 million metric tons of CO2. This is going to be that type of technology. So this scenario, I'm sorry. I'm a professor. We throw our arms around a lot, and sometimes we lose our microphones in the process. This scenario would have, right, very, very major impacts on agriculture, but it'd be largely introducing new markets. The second scenario that's being considered is what's termed the accelerated transition away from combustion. This is a scenario that would see New York largely abandon combustion technologies. Maybe not completely get rid of them, but mostly eliminated throughout the entire state. And so you'll see some big differences in these. There's still a little bit of renewable natural gas, 4% blend. So there would be some opportunities for the agricultural sector to produce a value-added product. If we look in the middle one, accelerated transition to zero-emission MHDVs. Those are medium and heavy-duty vehicles. This means tractors being converted to run off of electricity rather than diesel fuel. Combines, all of the heavy agricultural equipment that you utilize would have to be abandoned and replaced with electric vehicle versions. That would be occurring within the next 20 years under this. And then the final one over there, limited reuse of captured methane. It says reuse limited. Well, what that's really saying is the agricultural sector will be responsible for capturing methane that it produces, say with manure lagoons, but it would not be getting value out of that. It would be a burden on the agricultural sector, but it would not be something that could be converted into a value-added product, a new financial opportunity. So, again, these are extremes, but these are the two scenarios that the Climate Action Plan has really coalesced around, the Climate Action Council has really coalesced around, and so we're going to see something along these two lines. Now, final thing I'll note here, Scoping Plan does contain a number of strategies that are going to directly affect the agricultural sector, more than just saying, well, you have to decarbonize a certain amount. You'll note that these really focus on carbon sequestration, but also on getting new products from the agricultural sector. And so the second area here, the climate-focused bioeconomy, this is one of the more ambitious policies that we have seen in the entire country. There's a lot of states that are pursuing the bioeconomy, but this would take that pursuit to a new level. And this would really focus on replacing all these different products, even things like building materials, steel even, replacing these with agricultural products. And so there would be a lot of opportunities here to create something, to create a new market in the form of the bioeconomy. And these were contained in the draft scoping plan that came out. So final point I'll make, and this is just more of a call to action, we are in the midst of a 4-month public comment period for the scoping plan. There's a reason it's called the draft scoping plan. Between now, January 1st, and the end of April, the public has an opportunity to comment on it. I can tell you firsthand experience, there are going to be a number of groups that are going to be pushing that accelerated transition away from combustion scenario. They're actively advocating for that to be implemented. So, as the agricultural community, make sure you make your voice heard, right? This is going to directly impact your sector in many, many ways over the next 20 to 30 years. And so take advantage of this public comment period over the next 3.5 months to make your opinions heard, because there's going to be a lot of people pushing for changes that would have a very substantial impact and not necessarily all to the positive for the agricultural sector. Thank you.
All right. Magic.
Hi, everyone. So you might be asking, what is the agricultural community going to do? I am here representing American Farmland Trust. I'm standing in for Aaron Risto, who unfortunately couldn't make it today. And I found out I was doing this week, so apologies if I seem a little rusty on my climate science. So I work with American Farmland Trust, and our mission is to keep farmers on the land, to protect farmland, and to promote sound farming practices. So our entire goal is to keep agricultural land in agricultural production, no matter what the future holds. Agriculture is obviously what feeds us, and I think that farmers, especially farmers in this room, are some of the best equipped people to deal with problems and to prepare for the future. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about a project that we have in the Genesee River Valley. So Western New York, we have 11 farms, and they are standout farms. We have at least 2 of the AEM award winners. These are exemplary farms. And when we were thinking of ways to make an impact, especially with water quality, especially with land conservation, we thought, who do we look to, if not the best farms in the state? So we have 11 farms that have signed on to be part of a network, and the goal of the network is to get farmers to talk to other farmers and to learn from one another and to go to other farms and see what is working and what is not. These are farms that are very well-run businesses, so they are well-equipped to try innovative technology, to test new things that might be kind of scary to smaller farms. So we represent almost 50,000 acres with these 11 farms. Jeffries, who is here, they're one of our farms. And we have over almost 16,000 head of livestock. Our farms tend to be dairy and cash crop. And all of the water, obviously, in the Genesee drains to the Great Lakes. So we have a water quality component that we're really concerned about nutrient runoff. We're concerned about greenhouse gases. And we want to know more about what changes we can make to reduce these impacts. So these farmers have, for the past several years, the demonstration network was founded in 2018, and we hope to continue building it to move across the state. And they've been trying some regenerative practices for us so that we can really look at what they're doing. We have some research plots, and we're trying to quantify exactly how to measure the practice's long-term impacts. So what they're doing in the short term, how it's going to translate to long-term impacts. So these are some pictures of some of the practices that we're looking at. In the upper left-hand corner, you see John McCauley. He's crimping. He's doing a planting green method. What we're looking at with planting green is that it really helps create a lot of biomass on the surface. So the biomass means more organic matter, which means healthier soils. And this is a very long-term, slow process. Sometimes, given a season, farmer might not have good luck planting green, but the more we do it and the more we find out about it, we have better recommendations for what they can do in the future. This is, in the middle, this is Jay Swede. He's strip tilling. We found that reduced tillage is really the #1 way that farmers can reduce their carbon footprint because, like we said, the farm equipment takes a lot of fuel, fossil fuels, to run. And so the less you're running the tractors, the more you're saving on your carbon footprint. We are big on the cover cropping. In the lower left side, that's Jay Swede's cover crops. All of our farms in the network are very heavy on the cover crops. And what they found is that their soil is a lot healthier. They have to use fewer herbicides. They have a lot more biomass. And their soils are just, each year they're getting better and better with their organic matter. On the right side, that's from a research plot that we did. And I think what this photo demonstrates, these are 3 different types of cover crops. You can see everything that's going on below the surface. So that's our main focus, is whatever's growing on top of the soil is great. It's what feeds us. It's what feeds our animals. But really, it's what's going on below the surface, which is what's going to really help us when we're preparing for climate change. Just a quick slide. Because our farms are businesses at the end of the day, everyone wants to know, if I'm going to try something new, or if I'm going to take a risk, and if you're telling me I have to meet this standard and I don't know how to do it, how is that going to affect my bottom line? And the reality is everything that a farmer does affects his bottom line. And farms need to be profitable businesses in order to be maintained in the future. So we have a series of economic case studies that we've completed. Part of the series was a larger project that looked at farms across the nation. But in New York, we have 4 completed, and we're starting on our 5th one. And we partner up with Cornell economists to really look at all of the practices. There are numbers associated with basically every movement on the farm since they adopted soil health practices. So whatever they did before, we don't care about. We want to know what has changed since they adopted those soil health practices. And what we found is that every single farm, including an organic dairy, which is difficult, has made a profit by treating their soils better, because the better they treat their soils, the better harvest that they get, the less tillage they have to do, and they're looking at their long-term investment in their farm. So this is Jay Swede. He has a 343% return on investment for his soil health savings that he has implemented on his farm. Primarily, that's through reduced tillage and cover cropping and improving his organic matter. Along with that, we use some online tools where we're actually modeling the nutrient load that is being reduced and estimating the greenhouse gases that are reduced by these soil health practices. So the NTT there, that's the nutrient reduction tool that we're using. And we have to take just a small portion of a field to sort of model out the entire impact. But his nitrogen is being reduced by 40%, his phosphorus by 92%, and his suspended sediment load by 96%. The COMET tool is an NRCS tool that was developed recently, and it's not exact. It is available for any farmer to use if they want to use it, but it gives us a pretty good ballpark. So in that same field, his greenhouse gases were reduced by 476%, which is the equivalent of taking 2 cars off the field. And this is just on one field that he has. And these farmers, like I said, they have combined about 50,000 acres. And so the more we work with them to educate not only what is happening with our climate changing, but also what practices they can do on their farm, the bigger impacts we're going to have. So some of our early field trial results is that looking at planting greens specifically, we found that lower synthetic nitrogen levels were needed and higher biomass was allowed from cover crops because you plant in it a little bit later. And the synthetic N is great because what they found is that if you're adding a lot of synthetic fertilizers, it tends to deplete the overall health of your soil. The biological activity tends to be a little bit lower. So I'm really looking forward to working with these farms in the future, and I'm really excited about all the work that they're doing, because I really think that though these are high standards to meet, I think that these farmers are ready to do it.
Thank you. All right. Hi, my name is Tinia Pina, and I'm the founder and CEO of Renewable. A really quick introduction as to what Renewable is, but I'm really here and excited to share what Renewable is partnered on a New York State funded project, which is Glens Falls Urban Agricultural Pilot. So a little bit about me. I'm not traditionally trained in the agricultural sense. As mentioned earlier, I majored in IT from Virginia Tech and really fell in love with urban agriculture. And so a lot of my experience and journey has been self-directed, learning and just being really fortunate to be with others that have been technically trained both in soil science, general agronomy, and indoor agriculture, which I hope to give you a larger sense of what that is shortly. So what Renewable does, it's very similar to what Tristan was explaining earlier in terms of our contribution to the bioeconomy that New York State is really forward thinking on. We take food waste from food manufacturing, distribution, and processing. We take that waste stream as a raw material, and essentially we turn it into a viable alternative for essentially direct replacement for mineral salts. Our goal is to have a positive climate and financial impact to farms. Our first focus is for indoor farms. So that's typically described as vertical farms, greenhouses, and any indoor farm in a controlled environment. Could be in a classroom, it could be in a warehouse. But in Glens Falls, which is in eastern part of the state, we are set out and committed, so we've received some funding from New York State Empire State Development Group, along with the municipality of Glens Falls, to show improve, essentially through a 12-month demonstration pilot, if we can truly use underutilized or distressed industrial and commercial properties in non-urban environments to basically serve as a viable model for indoor farms to be embedded in. And we see that as a huge opportunity, not only in terms of just economic development for equality purposes, but also just for areas outside of urban cities to take part of. A lot of the major tailwinds that have been fueling or surging the growth within indoor agriculture or just urban agriculture has largely been led by the fact that we can grow year-round, we don't need to use the usage of pesticides and herbicides, and the fact that there is a higher density of food grown per square foot than typically traditionally in outdoor field farms. Now, the model has never been to replace field agriculture. That has never really been the mission. It's more so to help us have a complementary way of growing year-round that gives farms, especially the non-urban areas, to grow more specialty crops with a higher productivity rate, and also give them more diverse revenue streams. So the goal has always been to increase economic opportunity, to increase job creation, and hopefully to increase the value of these underutilized buildings that have no longer, whether it's retail tenants or other commercial opportunities currently occupied there. So the 5 main goals: increasing local food production. A lot of these models, whether you may have heard of some of the greenhouses more local to New York City, such as Gotham Greens, Aero Farms, major contributors to media, but there's a lot of other farms, especially that are represented in this room, that aren't spoken about. But the great thing that they do, greenhouses or otherwise, is contribute to hyper-local food production, encouraging downtown revitalization. So we're really innately focused on doing that in Glens Falls, because if we can prove that, then we can do that similarly in Syracuse, Utica, and other areas where, again, there's a non-urban focus, embracing technology, reducing energy usage, and accommodating a changing workforce. As we all know, labor has been a huge challenge for most. So the way that we see increasing value for distressed properties by placing what would be a grow box within a underutilized commercial or industrial property, we see that as a way of creating urban revitalization. So it's rethinking the usage of these properties, how we can create more productivity within them, and also as a result, can we introduce new crop varieties that are being challenged, grown around the world, and increase some of those production of more exotic plant varieties in, again, non-urban areas. Smart, sustainable technology. So one contributor that my company really tries to create a lot of research around, we've done a number of, at least 8 years of R&D of focusing on how we can take food waste and replicate the strong biological activity that Stephanie alluded to earlier, and replicate it for these indoor farms that are traditionally just using mineral salts. And these mineral salts contribute to 3% of the global greenhouse gas emissions around the world, and just water. We want to completely displace the usage of mineral salts and allowing for food waste to be that direct replacement. And also helping these farms take their wastewater and turn it into a product that they can thereby sell in a higher value market, as well as increase their water resiliency and self-sufficiency on site. Lastly is food security. So by increasing the food production on a local level, especially within New York State, we can help in some of these food impoverished areas. So the team in Glens Falls is made up by Glens Falls Municipality. We also are supported by the Tech Garden, which is based here in Syracuse, and Rethink H2O, along with National Grid and others that either contribute technology to the project, energy emissions incentives, energy modeling, all ways to which we can help on some of the goals that Tristan alluded to earlier, reduction in energy usage, increase in energy efficiency, and hopefully just overall decarbonization. So the project is actually going to be located in a former retail. It's a second floor of a currently abandoned use in downtown Glens Falls. We're occupying this grow box within a former retail space, only roughly 300 square feet, right? So it's far different than some of the other vertical farm models that you may have seen. You may have seen some of these shipping containers that take 20 or 40-foot shipping containers, and they place them anywhere around the world, and that's their way of growing in a hyper-local fashion. We're doing this within the non-traditional sense, again, a former kind of retail commercial space. And the goal is to prove out within that very tight 300 square feet, what is the water usage? What is the nutrient usage, the energy usage? Are we truly creating a model that historically is being challenged by investors, by the media, how profitable and from a long-term financial and sustainable sense vertical farming truly is? Can we do that within a grow box, within an industrial or former commercial space? But also, be able to expand it to a 1 acre. So if we extrapolate that, are we truly making an impact to some of the things that I mentioned earlier? So the things that the project will be measured on, again, 12-month pilot, and the goal is for all this information to be publicly built. So you will have access to this, all the measurements in terms of what are the economics of the model, of the farm model, what has been the impact from an environmental perspective, energy consumption, water consumption, are we saving, the local end buyers, which are restaurants, food banks, hospitals, the basil that we plan to produce for them, are we saving them the shipping charges and costs that have been increased as a result just largely in the industry, whether it's for inputs or just general shipment, getting fresh produce to the end customer. Production, again, are we producing at a viable scale indoors versus in other models? And lastly, labor force. Labor force is a huge challenge, especially in some of these indoor farms where it does require a bit more manual process, moving the plants from stage 1 of seeding to full maturity, and finding the technical expertise for that. So there's a huge pipeline gap, and so these are all things that we hope to prove and disseminate publicly. Is this really a model that can move forward, especially in the state of New York? So this is an example. Some of these vertical farms aren't all structured or designed in the same way, but traditionally the one that you see here, at least it has proven to be easier to scale and does use a lot less resources than some of the other vertical farms that you may have seen pictures in to date. So thank you so much. Really looking forward to the panel.
Yeah, it's super. I told you there was going to be a wide diversity, not diversity, but there's just a wide range of possibilities here in decarbonization. I've got a couple questions. I don't want to take too much, so please get ready to ask your own, but I think I want to start, and anybody can answer, but Tristan, your slide caught my attention on the need for us in the latter part of the century to actually go negative on carbon. And what little I have known about this in my prior life is that, we can do pretty well at being neutral, but and I know that there's interest at the UN Intergovernmental panel on this level too. So I'm curious how you see that going. What opportunities are there for New York producers to contribute to the carbon negative outcomes? How do we sink below that line?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? If that was an easy answer, we'd be doing it already. So it's
not unless you can get the ROI. That's definitely
there. You go. Yeah, that's well, and that's part of it. Right? There's no money to do that in the sense that there is currently no price mechanism. You're not going to receive a 343% ROI for sequestering CO2 because there's no incentive to do that. And so that's part of the problem is we don't have that incentive, and what the UN is really showing us is we need to come up with an incentive, and that's a big part of what the Clcpa is showing. That said, there's no shortage of pathways that will allow sequestration like that. Some of it's, as we're talking about with soil health, right? It's just a matter of reducing the amount of tillage, ultimately preventing soil losses, soil erosion that can cause greenhouse gas emissions. In places, New York State is, quite unique in the sense that its agricultural sector is not as active as it necessarily was in the past, right? It's not like the Midwest or the Central Plains where you continue to have more and more land coming under production every single year. And that's an opportunity because that means that those are largely depleted soils. The soil carbon has been depleted, but the land is not under nearly as active production as it was in the past. And so, one of my colleagues at SUNY ESF, Tim Volk, has been doing some really phenomenal research showing, well, if you take land that's been in production in the past, but is no longer in active production, and instead of growing corn or beans on it, you grow something like shrub willow instead. He's been measuring the soil carbon and finding that you achieve very substantial below ground carbon increases. What that really means is you're pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere and burying it underground. Or you can go down to Cornell. Professor Johannes Lehmann down there is running a what's termed a slow pyrolysis kiln. He is taking agricultural residues, everything from corn stover, he's even using chicken litter and manure. He's pyrolyzing it, which is a fancy way of saying he's taking these carbonaceous feedstocks and he is converting them to pure carbon. That pure carbon, we have actually seen there's archaeological digs. This is a technology that's about 500 years old, been deployed in South America since before Christopher Columbus arrived. Ultimately, what they've found is that that carbon remains locked away for hundreds of years, and they actually estimate it would probably stay locked away for about 10,000 years. This is being done in Ithaca. Right? So there's a lot of different options out there that the agricultural community can contribute to and actually get value-added products out of. What the missing piece has been is the incentive to do so, and I think that's a big part of what the Clcpa is trying to do is how to incentivize that type of development.
Yeah. Anybody else? Good?
No,
all right. Stephanie, those numbers are pretty impressive. How do we get the word out to the rest of the state?
I think the farmer-to-farmer outreach, I think, has been really effective because I think farmers, although they respect scientists, I think that they learn best from their peers. I think maybe we all do. And I think having sort of informal communities of people being able to ask questions like what was it really like? How did you really end up doing this? I think though it's slow, I think it's a really good formula for change over time. And some of these big issues like trying to go negative with carbon, there are tools that farmers have available to them. Like there are, digesters and cover and flare systems, and really the problem is that they're really expensive. And only the farms that have really a lot of resources are the ones that are able to put these systems in right now. So I think having conversations on the policy front about making them more accessible to everybody might have some real change. But I think first and foremost, especially given the price of milk over the past several years, farms have really been struggling financially, and they're not really in the position to make huge changes when it's going to negatively hurt their bottom line. So getting the message out that small changes, soil health changes, reduced tillage, it just means running your tractor less. It just means planting a little bit later, having small changes that don't cost a lot of money, I think will bring a lot of change over time. It just takes a while.
So we heard this morning and then amplified here by both of you really about how New York farmers are demonstrating climate resilient strategies. What else is out there as it relates to farmers continuing that same theme on inputs, animal feed, et cetera? What else do we see on the horizon that is strategies that they can deploy?
One thing that we're looking at is or that we'd like to look at is the biological fertilizers. And I'm not an expert on this, but rather than putting on synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, having a biological input. I guess there's a company called Pivot, and some of the farms in our network have been really intrigued to use it and to try it. And my understanding is it's pretty new on the market. and it's supposed to fix nitrogen biologically. There's also a similar version that uses carbon. And so I think some of these new and innovative fertilizers and inputs, I think, could potentially have a lot of impact. I don't know, though.
Anybody else on that one?
So I think anaerobic digestion plays a very, very big role in a lot of ways, and as Stephanie pointed out, it's expensive, but ultimately the reason it makes a lot of sense, methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. New York's Clcpa makes it an even more potent greenhouse gas than the rest of the world does, and so what that means is if you can destroy a ton of methane, there is a lot of value that is going to be deployed under the Clcpa to do so. And the simplest way to do that is to capture that methane and to combust it. You turn that methane into CO2. CO2 is a much less potent greenhouse gas, but you also get energy out of it, right? And so you're taking a waste product that's very destructive to the climate, and you're turning it into a valuable product, and you're making it less dangerous in the process of getting that value out. And so, when we talk about dairy farms, swine lots, any operation that produces large amounts of methane in a concentrated place, that's a perfect opportunity if you can get around the economics that Stephanie was referring to.
Yeah, and I was going to say to Stephanie's point about biologicals, there was an article in the New York Times maybe that had shown that because of fertilizer prices have been increased or surged by so much, given that China and Russia are withholding their reserves and no longer producing and exporting at the rate that they were, especially for urea and other nitrogen sources, manure and other biological fertilizers are now being sold out at volumes that have been unprecedented. So I think that's the hedge that a lot of these farms are, but I'm not sure of what is the differential in terms of like productivity. But the great thing is that it does rebuild the soil and return the carbon. So I think it's more of a long-term, are these farms willing to reinvest in that way by also hedging the pricing risk that comes along with traditional mineral salt-based fertilizers?
Yeah, I've seen the same alarming numbers you have, so I'm sure there's a lot of back of the envelope calculations and thinking going on what to do there. I can keep going, but I'll bet you have some questions for me. What do you got out there? Oh, listen to that. All right, Troy. We got a microphone coming. You're dealing with an old man up here. You got to wait a second.
We have one right here.
I can
Here
be
we
quick. I'll let Troy go first.
Go ahead. Yep.
Hey, I'm interested because I work in animal agriculture, the combination of using animals, this resource of manure, and putting the animals back on the land in a regenerative fashion. If everybody reads about regenerative agriculture, they're talking about getting animals back to the land, doing these types of practices. Where are we on that? Because this morning it was looking a little bleak. I have to put my cows on a veranda of a hotel. I don't know what that futuristic, my cows don't do vertical well. Thank you.
Well, Troy, you're the grazing specialist.
You don't think they could graze on a veranda? Come on now.
Well, you have 14,000 cows, you said. You have this model Genesee Valley farm network here, and you're talking about cover crops and a lot of other stuff. So now we're talking about integrating back to the land, the utilization, lowering the carbon footprint of cows, but then all of a sudden we've got methane and they're burping and they're doing other. I don't know what the answer is, honestly. I'm scratching my head because I'm in the 50% rule. 50% say it's good, 50% say it isn't. And I'm stuck in the middle trying to make a decision.
That it's good to have the cows grazing out on the land.
Or utilizing those crop residues and getting them off concrete, and they're putting the manure directly back on the land. Biologically,
I would say, I mean, a lot of those 15,000 head that you saw in my statistics are in CAFOs, so they're under roof. They're not grazing actively. They're big CAFOs. So, and I'm not a CAFO expert, but my understanding is they're trying to keep CAFOs as a closed system, so everything that goes in stays in, and there's no you know, export of nutrients. That's the point of a nutrient management plan, right? Tinia?
Sorry, I'm not interrupting.
No, I don't have a good answer for you, Troy. But I think that we're seeing, and especially this comes more with my work with women landowners, smaller farms popping up, younger operators who don't have the resources to buy 300 acres, so they're buying 10. And they're really interested in how they can make the most use of their 10 acres. So they have fewer animals, maybe, you know, we would say, relatively speaking, less of an impact than our 10,000 acre farms. But I think that they're really interested in systems like what you've put out there as a sustainable, really regenerative, smaller system. So I am seeing a lot of that, which I think is hopeful. But in terms of the big farms that we work with, they do tend to be CAFOs.
And I can't speak to like how you can use the livestock as regrazing for more of a regenerative agriculture practice, but if you have an appetite for trying something new, there is a company that we have a relationship with. It's called Lemna, L-E-M-N-A. And depending on the size of your manure lagoon and how much is in volume you're contributing to that lagoon each day, what they do is they take your residuals, so the solids from the manure as well as the liquids, and they grow a type of a plant called Lemna. And Lemna has a high amount of protein. I think it's about 40%. So it's about competitive with soy. And their goal is to help the farm monetize that. One is it cleans the Lemna as a result of the using the manure and the wastewater from the manure as a nutrient source. It cleans the water while at the same time growing and producing Lemna, and they find third-party markets for you to then sell that Lemna as a competitive alternative to soy, which my broad understanding of soy is there's been some challenging in the market of how high the demand for soy is going to be. So that could be one way that you can monetize that as an animal feed through the production of Lemna.
Final thing I'll just note, right, when you're talking about, you know, are you talking a covered operation, are you talking grazing? Yeah, I don't want to say that when we talk about anaerobic digestion or manure or anything like that, that we're saying, well, if you've got all your cattle grazing, you need to put them in a centralized facility so that, you know, you can capture all of that. Ultimately, you know, it's more important to capture methane at a covered facility, because that's where, right, you know, basically if you're talking a very concentrated operation where, you know, all the cattle waste is going into the exact same location, that's where the anaerobic conditions exist that you're going to have a lot of methane production. Whereas if you're talking cattle out, you know, ranging on a very, very large area, right, you're talking cow patties at that point, which, you know, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to produce methane that same way. So there's always going to be some, right, you know, when they urinate, there's going to be methane regardless of where they are. But it's more that, you know, if you're already in a concentrated operation, that's where the opportunity is to capture that methane, rather than saying if you're ranging, you need to do a concentrated operation so you can capture any methane.
More questions?
Should I jump in over here?
Suzanne had a
There's,
question.
So this is Suzanne from this morning. I heard the comment on the panel that only the big farms can access some of these technologies like digesters because they're so expensive. And because we didn't get a chance this morning on the panel to talk about who pays and how you finance this, I just wanted to put it out there that we need to not automatically think that every farm has to pay for and own all of the new infrastructure that's going to be needed. I think we can do what a lot of other industries have done and put other people's money to work. We can think about cooperative ownership structures. We can think about third-party financing. I think the role of New York State going forward and the federal government is going to be to, you know, use loan guarantees and other ways of supporting ag banks and de-risking ag banks financing us and subsidizing the interest rates. I think, you know, we shouldn't be limited by that upfront capital outlay, and we should make that a barrier. That's how solar has scaled in this country, through solar leasing using third-party financing. We can think about organic waste campuses where food waste and manure is mixed so you get higher energy output. So I would just throw it out there that we can use all kinds of new financial structures and use other sources of money so that we don't further leverage our farms.
Yeah, so quick response. First of all, Suzanne's the expert on this, right? So thank you for throwing that out there, because that's ultimately a very, very important point. And the reason that's so important is because, you know, one of the frequent comments that was made in Albany when the scoping plan was being put together was that the scoping plan was intended to serve as the market signal for the private sector to get involved in deploying all these different technologies that we're talking about. So, and I can tell you, just as director of the Bioeconomy Development Institute, we work very, very closely with industry. Industry is sitting on the sidelines just waiting to see what happens in New York so that they can start deploying all of the resources that they have available in pursuit of these technologies, right? When we talk anaerobic digestion, one opportunity from that is to produce renewable natural gas that is going to displace existing fossil natural gas. Well, there are a lot of companies engaged both in fossil natural gas in New York and also in renewable natural gas countrywide that would love to be able to deploy technologies like that. So it's not as if they're, you know, the overall government or, you know, anyone is really expecting these small, low margin, you know, commercial operations to deploy these technologies on their own. Rather, the purpose of the scoping plan, as stated, has been to try to provide that spark, that impetus to get the resources that do exist. And there are some very, very concentrated resources, including right here in New York. You know, I'd love to hear Tania's comments on that based on your background in finance. But this is not something where it's going to come down to an individual farmer to deploy these technologies. Rather, it's going to be establishing partnerships with technology providers, with the market participants that are already engaged in these industries to deploy these technologies at the scale that's necessary if we're going to meet the goals under the Clcpa.
I'll quickly add that, so there's a state-based agency called NYSERDA, and NYSERDA has been helpful in helping fund these early high-risk technologies to help farming just at large, reduce their carbon emissions, et cetera. But there's not enough capital to fuel, you know, that high risk. It's still that crossing the chasm of like before it's fully deployed to all farms is still not there yet. Private capital is hard to find in most cases because agriculture typically requires patient capital, because they realize it takes a lot longer time to get the return that they want. So unfortunately, it's not as quick as I would like to say at this time.
We have a long history of you know, helping somewhat, you know, through the Environmental Protection Fund, but I'm sure lots of other sources. And to your points, collectively, industry has to see how they get their ROI eventually out of this deal, right? What else? People?
Pat, I got one.
Yep. Rick?
Excuse me. Tristan, could you talk a little bit about the characteristics and differences between animal, plant, cyclical-based methane versus fossil fuel-based methane and its relative role within this discussion of Clcpa?
Yeah, so ultimately both sources of methane are important sources in New York State, and so this has been an important discussion, is that distinction. You know, at the end of the day, what it comes down to is when we talk about carbon dioxide emissions, you have to distinguish between fossil carbon emissions and what we term biogenic, you know, really biological carbon emissions, because they have a completely different impact on the environment. And the reason for that, right, fossil emissions, this is a fossil fuel that it represents carbon dioxide that's been buried underground for millions of years. And one of the reasons that we have seen the atmospheric CO2 level increase so drastically in the last 60 years is that we are taking an amount of CO2 that took millions of years to be pulled out of the atmosphere and buried underground, and we're emitting it back into the atmosphere in 60 years, right? Whereas with biogenic carbon, this is carbon that was in the atmosphere a year ago, and then it was pulled out of the atmosphere, and then we return it to the atmosphere, and it's a constant cycle. And so it's not a, you know, multi-million year time scale, it's a monthly time scale, or, you know, more of an annual time scale. When it comes to methane, though, because methane is such an incredibly potent greenhouse gas, and more importantly, methane is being formed from what is ultimately carbon. And so regardless of whether we're talking biological methane or we're talking fossil methane, the impact on the climate is going to be very close to similar for that reason. It's going to have a very important impact. Now, in terms of how we treat it, though, that's where the important difference is. Because when we talk about fossil methane, right, you might say, well, in a perfect world, we're not actually going to have to worry about fossil methane contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. Because fossil methane is natural gas has value, and any natural gas, any methane that is emitted from a fossil fuel pipeline into the atmosphere is wasted. Right? And so in a perfect world, you capture it all, you combust it all, and there's going to be carbon dioxide emissions, but there won't be any methane emissions. But the fact of the matter is that our infrastructure does leak. There's a lot of debate over by how much it leaks, and New York has done an incredible amount of work to reduce the amount of leakage that occurs from its pipelines. But there still is some methane that leaks, and that's one of the reasons that the Clcpa is really focused on ultimately eliminating natural gas use in the state. But when it comes to the biological sources of methane, we cannot stop those, right? When we talk about fossil methane, that's something that is only accessible to the atmosphere because we as humans brought it up. It's buried underground. We're the ones that extracted it, made it so that it could actually leak into the atmosphere. But when it comes to biological sources of methane, we're talking about things like manure. We're talking about things like wastewater, right? And one of the colleagues I work with, his 2-year-old child put it best: everybody poops. Right? We are constantly producing, both us as humans and every living organism, we are constantly producing the material that generates biological methane. And so we cannot just pretend that, because we legislated away, that biological methane emissions are going to stop. They are going to constantly exist. And so the question is, how do we capture them and convert them into something that is not going to be as dangerous for the climate, rather than just trying to eliminate them entirely, because these are natural processes. We are going to produce biological methane whether we want to or not.
Ready? Anybody got one? While you're thinking about that, I mentioned early on I saw a lot of similarity between where we're going globally, where we are in the state, and sort of in between where at least the Biden White House wants to take us. Any comments on the new net zero target that we have coming from the White House? How does that feel sort of in relation to Clcpa? Or I don't have any sense of it myself, but I know it's out there.
Yeah, so I'll just say the Clcpa is still trying to figure out what role agriculture is going to play, as I was talking about. The Biden administration has made that decision, right? It already knows what it's going to do. I think it's very telling that former Iowa governor, I'm from Iowa originally, former Iowa Governor Tom Vilsack, who was also former U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary, is back as the Secretary of Agriculture. Ultimately, you look at a lot of the proposals the Biden administration has released. For example, its Sustainable Aviation Fuel Grand Challenge to ultimately be producing 3 billion gallons per year of sustainable aviation fuel by 2030, and to be producing all of our aviation fuel from sustainable sources not all that long after that. That's agriculture right there, right? And there's a lot of provisions, whether it's talking about doubling the biomass-based diesel blenders tax credit, that's predominantly agriculture, right? So I don't think the Biden administration is in any doubt agriculture is going to play a very critical role if we're going to hit that target, both from the sense of sequestration, but also just decarbonizing, especially our hard-to-electrify transportation systems.
Other questions, folks? Oh, got one over here. Yep. Microphone.
I can just speak up. When we were talking about putting the program together, one of the discussions we had was how the forestry industry. Sorry, when we were talking about the program last summer, part of the discussion was we considered having some element of the forestry industry maybe as part of one of these panel discussions here, but in the discussions that you've had, are there ways that the forestry industries or some of the other kind of related agricultural industries could participate in this issue of trying to resequester some of that carbon?
Yeah, so if you look through the scoping plan, forestry, it plays a very crucial role. And ultimately we saw, right, the advisory panel that was set up was the agricultural and forestry advisory panel, right? These were not being split up into separate entities just because there's such a strong connection there. But New York State's forestry industry has a major opportunity under the Clcpa. And the reason for that, especially when we talk about the 75% renewable distillates by 2030, that was under that one scenario I showed, there is not enough lipid feedstock to supply that, right? Where the U.S., thanks to California, California is acting as a giant sponge for soybean oil right now. There is not enough lipid feedstock to meet that target, which means the only way we would be able to hit that target is if we started using forestry residue. This is something we've already started to see. There are actually demonstration planes flying on jet fuel produced from, jet fuel is a form of distillate fuel produced from woody biomass. This is something that's being done out in the Northwest Washington state in particular. So there's when we start thinking about these hard to electrify transportation fuels in particular, if we are to start deploying those at scale, forestry, right, especially when we start thinking about forest residue, there would be a lot of opportunities, you know, especially you think about a lot of that forest residue, it's currently just decomposing out in the land. And that's producing greenhouse gas emissions. And so if you can convert that, you are recycling that carbon. Might not be the same as sequestration, but it practically has the same effect.
If I can add to that, there's a company called Propagate Ventures, and they help orchards as well as forestry farms or timber-focused farms to help increase their carbon that's returned to the land. And if you haven't, they also help them with a number of other services. And the benefit to the farms operating those markets is that they're paying the farms to transition in growing in the practices that they've really kind of defined as their core. I don't know them as familiar so that I can speak at length, but that's something that if you're really involved in forestry or again, orchards, I would look into because they have provided a financial model or market to pay farms to grow a certain way in those specific, I would say, commodities.
There's actually, I'm sorry, Stephanie, if you were going to say something, I don't want to. There's another important point, and so I really appreciate you bringing up this question because we don't discuss this all that much, but Tinia, you actually prompted this because of something earlier you'd said, right? You're talking about replacing mineral fertilizer that has a very large carbon footprint because it's predominantly, was it natural gas it's produced from?
That's correct.
Right, we don't necessarily think about fossil products as something that we need to get rid of, right? Because we talk about fossil fuels and combustion and greenhouse gas emissions from that, but we're going to have to get rid of our fossil products too. And so that's going to mean, right, no more using natural gas as fertilizer. But actually one of the largest sources of demand for natural gas in the United States today, and the area that is growing fastest worldwide, is plastics, right? And so we're going to have to figure out where are we going to get these plastics from. Now, yes, to a certain extent we can recycle, we can stop using plastics, but there are a lot of plastics that we cannot get out of our lives, right? We are going to use them every single day whether we want to or not. You know, just look at the medical sector alone. It's very, very important. So we need plastics, but we can't use natural gas over a long period of time to do that. Well, major opportunity is using biomass, and so that could be the forestry sector. That could be other types of agriculture. There's a lot of work being done out in the Midwest to take things like corn stover or even different types of soybean oils and converting those into plastics. Coca-Cola is now putting these types of bio-based plastics into their Coke bottles. So there's a lot of opportunities here for products that are going to contribute, not necessarily in the way that we think of, but they're still going to contribute to decarbonization in the long term.
Other questions? You ready to give me the hook? All right. Look, sounds like there might be a chance for one more question.
We got two of them.
We got one right up here.
Yeah, so when you're looking at the future, you know, it doesn't have to be this next year, or, you know, when you're thinking of barriers to what we're trying to achieve with some of these goals that you're talking about. I mean, what would you say if you had to pick one barrier, you know, whether it's this year, next year, you know, in the next 5 or 10 years, what each of you could give, you know, one barrier you can think of that's probably the biggest priority we should be focusing on?
I want to hear what the two of you have to say first.
You can go down the line. You can go
Okay,
first.
fair enough. I'm the ivory tower academic, right? So I like hearing the people that are on the ground talking about it, you know, because I'm not necessarily connected to reality as much as them. So ultimately, the main barriers right now, it's a combination of market acceptance and then also deployment. And this is really what we're seeing is we have solutions to all these problems. You know, when we talk about how do we get New York to an 85 to 100% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, we know we can do it. We just don't know exactly how we're going to get there. But the technologies are available. And the main challenge right now, and we have seen this repeated, really everywhere except California. California is about the one jurisdiction that's managed to do it properly with its low carbon fuel standard, is we need to connect the capital resources that are available with the technologies that need to be deployed. And that generally is not being achieved. And I think, it's as true here in New York as anywhere. And so that's going to be the biggest barrier, right? We don't need new technological breakthroughs, although they certainly help when they happen. But what we ultimately need is the capital so that we can start deploying these technologies that have been developed in a way that's going to allow us to hit those targets. And I personally at least see that as being one of the biggest challenges that's going to face us over the next 1 to 5 years.
I would say a big challenge in the agricultural world is just the term climate change or global warming. I come from a farming family myself, and I can't bring up the topic of global warming to my father because he said, well, look at last winter. It was the coldest winter we ever had. So to me, it's being thoughtful about how you start these conversations. In my world, we talk a lot about soil health because soil health is the key to climate resilience. And farmers care very much about their soil. They know their land, they know their soil, and they care about the health of their soil. So if you say, look, if you take good care of your soil, you're going to be more resilient in the future. Your farm is going to withstand flood events better. You're going to have higher crop yields. You're going to use your tractor less. What we're telling them is that they hold the key to climate resilience without ever saying the term global change, global warming. And along with that, I would say a big barrier is the economics. Upfront, I think that's a big barrier to any adoption of change in a farm. And so trying to make resources more accessible, trying to make new technology more doable. And I think that's one of the main goals of our demonstration farm network is just having farmers look at what other farmers are doing so that they can see how they can implement it on their own farm within their own budgets. And then it connects them also to the resources that can help them do that.
And I think the only thing that I would add is kind of similar to what Tristan and Stephanie were mentioning is that, and I'll wrap this up quickly, maybe it's...
Thank you. That's right. Stop doing that.
Maybe it's a sign.
Keep going.
Okay, as kind of what, there was a lady that's mentioned earlier having waste campuses, because I think what's missing is the fact that there are markets to sell said waste or said product or anything that could be value added produced, but knowing where the off-taker is that would buy said X and having close proximity to that off-taker or potential buyer, it's what's missing. And so the education of finding them and knowing if there is a viable price point that even justifies going through the work of doing this, diverting your waste in the right way or turning into an alternative for plastic, I think causes a lot of resistance to do what is right with those potential commodities. But everything else said was great.
How about a hand for these three fine people?
Thank you, Patrick.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Tina, Stephanie, and Tristan. What a great panel. Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. Before we bring out our final speaker to the podium, I would like to recognize two more award honorees. Please welcome T&S Crop Services, the winner of our Next Generation Farm Award, and Committee Chair Darren Phillips, to the front. Sponsors of the Next Generation Farm Award are Fried Maxick and the Voss Group. If they could please stand, that would be great. And here's a video.
The New York State Agricultural Society is pleased to shine a spotlight on the energy, commitment, and talent of a new generation of agriculturalists who are driving existing agribusiness and enterprises to new heights. Thank you to the Fried Maxick and the Voss Group for sponsoring the Next Generation Farmer Award. T&S Crop Service was founded by Tom Sheehan in 1985. Enlisting the support of his wife and extended family, Tom launched T&S from his village of Warsaw home with a single pickup truck outfitted with a small spray rig. Through the succeeding decades, numerous equipment and facility upgrades have been made to service the diverse customer needs in the Western New York region, and now the second generation of family have taken on leadership roles. After graduating from the University of Buffalo, Tom and Kay's son started as an apprentice applicator and eventually a licensed commercial applicator, all while learning the art of purchasing and selling fertilizer, crop protection products, and seed. In 2013, the family welcomed Tom's nephew, Mark, to the team as an expert welder. Mark's welding experience helped facilitate key expansion of fertilizer and crop protection storage. The T&S family lost their husband, father, leader, and friend suddenly in 2018. This devastating loss brought daughter, Erin, and her husband, George, back to the business. Today, T&S has over 36,000 square feet of storage and filling space, operates 6 John Deere sprayers, 2 Hagie sprayers, 2 floaters for both liquid and dry applications, and a myriad of dry and liquid trailers. In 2021, T&S Crop Service was able to apply crop protection and fertilizer to well over 130,000 acres. Construction of a 1 million gallon liquid fertilizer storage tank began this fall, which will allow T&S to streamline the delivery process even further. T&S Crop Service is proud to honor Tom's legacy and support the agricultural community in every way possible. Congratulations to T&S Crop Service, the winner of the 2022 Next Generation Farmer Award.
Next, I'd like to honor the members of the Indian River FFA as the Chapter of the Year. This award is sponsored by the New York State Grange, represented by Steve Coy. Unfortunately, the chapter is snowbound in the Tug Hill, but here's the video.
FFA is an important youth development program in New York State and has a successful track record for developing agricultural talent and supporting local communities. It is in honor of the New York State Agricultural Society to spotlight the energy and commitment of these youth with our Chapter of the Year Award, sponsored by the New York State Grange. The Indian River Central School FFA chapter, based in Philadelphia, New York, has a long history stretching over 6 decades in the greater northern New York community. The agricultural curriculum of the school has continued to evolve throughout the years to reflect student interest, and facilities now include a poultry coop, blueberry bushes, and apple trees. A major benefit of the FFA membership is participating in career and leadership development events. These activities expose students to emerging careers and build important skills like teamwork, public speaking, and interviewing. Indian River leads all New York State FFA chapters in total number of proficiency applications. 14 students earned the Empire State degree in 2021, the highest degree awarded by New York State FFA Association. And in 2020, the chapter had a record number of American degrees. Advisors Nicole Hurt and Joel Fultz work in the background as students take the lead on community events such as Thank a Farmer holiday platters and December dairy drives. Most recently, Indian River distributed 167 gallons of milk to 7 food pantries. Formed over 10 years ago, the Junior High Indian River chapter helps to build membership, leadership, and mentoring opportunities for older students. Congratulations to the students, faculty, and advisors of the Indian River FFA chapter, our 2022 New York State Agricultural Society FFA Chapter of the Year.
The Whittier Museum is located in the heart of the New York State Fairgrounds. It is a great partner to the New York State Ag Society. I would like to welcome Museum President Nathan Rogers to provide a short update on their activity.
Thank you, Chris. And I heard the emphasis on short. It continues to be my honor to serve as president of the Friends of the Witter Agricultural Museum, as Chris said, located on the grounds of the New York State Fair. We are working through continuing to improve our physical plant. Our building, built in 1928, is showing some signs of its well-worn wear, and this year we engaged, taking the opportunity from a break in attendance at the museum during the New York State Fair, to do some much-needed repairs. So we've started by removing the large back doors, and we are going to rebuild those historic doors and replace them. In the meantime, we have a small man door which will allow us to operate for our next opening opportunity, which will be at this year's New York Farm Show from February 24th to 26th. So if you haven't been to the Witter in a while and are looking for an opportunity to get out there, how about take a break during your February and come out during the Farm Show and pay us a visit. The Witter continues to look at upgrading our displays and the things that we're featuring that help emphasize and encourage understanding of the history of New York agriculture, including an updated dairy display. We're working on both a live hops exhibit outside and growing out our gardens and fruit trees that we planted in the back of the museum as a result of the demolition of the former grandstand. And those plantings are coming along great, and they help convey the message of the history of agriculture to our attendees. I want you to all remember that the Witter Museum, along with a display at Mann Library on the campus of Cornell University, are the two physical embodiments of the agricultural society that we have in the state, and we are in the process of developing in our memorial room a plaque opportunity honoring larger contributors to the ambassadors of the New York Ag Society, life members of the New York Ag Society, and of course, life members to the Friends of the Whittier Museum. We encourage your attendance, we appreciate your support, and we actually had a few people today who stopped by the booth and said they didn't know we existed. Well, now you do. Come on and visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. We're pleased to have Molly Adams, the state FFA president, here to introduce our next speaker. Molly is a SUNY Morrisville student, and her home FFA is the VVS chapter. Molly?
Thank you. Our next speaker needs no introduction. He has been a staunch advocate for agriculture since he was 18 years old working on a vegetable farm and now as our agriculture commissioner. During our training for state office, we got the opportunity to interact with several past state officers, and each one of them mentioned how they were able to interact with agriculture industry professionals and encouraged us to do the same throughout our year. The person that they mentioned time and time again was Commissioner Ball, and what a great experience getting to meet and interact with him was. After speaking with him today, I was able to see his passion for agriculture firsthand. Commissioner Ball is the type of person that puts his passion into action, as demonstrated by his willingness to serve in many capacities on behalf of our industry. We are fortunate to not only have him for New York, but also as president of the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. He is here with us today to share the state of agriculture in New York and the department's successes and future initiatives. I am honored to present to you today our New York State Agriculture Commissioner, Richard Ball.
I think I may have a little short the mark on dramatic because you stopped clapping before I got up here, but that's all right. Thank you so much. Appreciate that, Mark. Wow, it's been quite a day. And thank you for that introduction. I was just inside the hallway getting pigeonholed by somebody, but appreciate the introduction. Certainly want to thank the Ag Society Board for being our host here at this, and I appreciate the work that you have done in organizing this, pulling this off, especially today, to pull an event off like this, and such a success. And I want to thank all the presenters as well today. So let's give them a round of applause, if you don't mind. And really great for me to be back at New York Agriculture's best family reunion ever. I feel like a family reunion whenever I get with you guys because I think back of all the years that I've come here and all the people I've seen. And I remember being there when Pat was announced as commissioner. And for myself, it was just such a great memory. It's kind of like a family reunion without that uncle that shows up at your family reunions. You know, there's no uncles here. It's just a great group of people here. Really want to take just a minute also and recognize the Century Farms and our Bicentennial Awardees today. It was wonderful to be with them in person, get a picture taken with them, and celebrate their family's success and dedication to agriculture for over 100 years. And a very special congratulations to our Distinguished Service Citation Award winner, my good friend Pat Hooker. Pat has long been a champion for agriculture in New York State, working in so many capacities over the years, as we heard at lunchtime here. Most recently working as the state's Deputy Sec for Food and Agriculture, where I can tell you he was a tireless advocate for all of you. In large part, Pat's why I'm here today. I've known him nearly 30 years, first as a New York Farm Bureau member, then in his role as Commissioner of the Department of Ag, later at Empire State Development, working on ag investment opportunities for us across agriculture, and finally as Deputy Secretary. He's always been someone that I have looked up to. He's a correct thinker, a hero, and a mentor. Pat mentioned heroes. And in recent years, I've been blessed to work with and for my hero. Let's give another round of applause to Pat Hooker. And while you're clapping, all the awardees today that we've recognized, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. One question I often get from New York farmers is whether I speak to other commissioners, secretaries, and directors of ag from around the country. We do. We talk often, we collaborate quite often, usually through our work at the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, or NASDA. Some of you are familiar with that acronym. And I can tell you New York State is very active in NASDA, and this group is one of the most looked-to organizations in Washington, D.C. when it comes to thinking about anything agricultural. Having said that, I get to see other state staff and operations, and I'm proud to tell you that you have one amazing core group of deputy commissioners and division directors working for you here in New York State. They're all nationally recognized people. They understand and they care about what you do, and they make themselves available to me 24/7 to work on our mission and to make my life, frankly, better every single day. And I am incredibly fortunate to be able to be surrounded by them. As a matter of fact, all our staff at the department are incredible. I'm proud of the work they do and their dedication to agriculture each and every day. We have some of our staff with us here today, some that are here with us now, others you may have heard from or seen earlier in the day. For those of you that are here this afternoon, please, I'm going to have you stand up. They're in the back of the room here. But Nicole Leblanc is Deputy Commissioner. Nicole, thank you. Take a good look at her in case you need bus fare or cab ride or something like that. Mike Latham was here earlier today. His family actually was a family that received a Century Farm Award. Brian Steinmeller, you got to listen to and speak on the panel, climate panel this morning. Hannah Burkhead is here. Hannah is our Associate Director for Public Information. She's in the back there. Amy Lasnick If you ever want to have a meeting with me, be nice to Amy, because she's my executive operations manager. Amy, if you can wave to everybody. Jessica Brooks is here manning our booth out in the trade show, and she came in. Jessica, thank you so much. Susan Cincinello is here from Food Safety. Susan, there you go. And Steve Shermer here from Food Safety as well. Thank you both for your work and dedication. I also want to thank all of you for taking time to join us at the Ag Society Annual Forum and the State of Ag Address. While working through some continuing challenges here and concerns amidst this pandemic, but we've come a long way since last year when we had to do this forum virtually. I must say it's good to be back, even in these very different circumstances. This is a tradition I look forward to upholding every year. Today, we get to come together again to tackle some of our greatest challenges in agriculture, and there are many, including climate change, as has been our theme during all of today's discussions. You heard a lot about the state's role in combating climate change during earlier presentations today, particularly from Brian Steinmuller. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So we have no shortage of things to be concerned about or to worry about. We've been presented with numerous generational challenges and so many uncertainties today. It's pretty easy to feel under siege in agriculture. And I've heard the word crisis used repeatedly over the last few years. We've been facing tremendous uncertainty in our state when it comes to labor issues. And the wage board slated to meet a couple more times later this month. That Farm Labor's Fair Labor Practices Act was probably the most significant change to farm labor law in recent history. I'm encouraged that the Wage Board is taking some extra time to make their decision, as we believe this will help ensure a more comprehensive and thorough review of the data and the reports that were presented. We got some wonderful data from Farm Credit, wonderful review and report and analysis from Cornell University. I have to say, I'm reminded often of the Chinese characters that are used to form the word crisis. There's two characters. One character means dangerous. The second character means opportunity. So together, they see crisis as a dangerous opportunity. I believe the generational challenges that we face offer us generational opportunities as well. So I'm happy to be able to meet with you. I'm going to share a few concerns. I'm going to share a few more things on those opportunities that they might be, and also share a few things that I'm kind of excited about as we go forward. So we're here today not to look back, but to look forward towards the successes that we realized, like the Nourish New York program and our industry's continued efforts to ensure the resiliency and the stability of our food supply chain. I'm honored to share that I have recently taken on the daunting and also humbling position as NASDA president, which will help me address your concerns at the federal level. I'm dedicated to collaborating through NASDA to advocate for and implement the change that will have a lasting impact on our shared industries. The policies set forth by NASDA this year are going to help us deliver on the collective commitment to address the most imminent, the most pressing agricultural issues that we face today, while at the same time offering us the ability to strengthen our farms and our food supply for the future. We're working on expanding emergency food supply networks on a national level, emphasizing the importance of free interstate commerce, growing the hemp industry, and promoting agricultural workforce reform. This is in addition to NASDA's priority issues, which include trade, food safety, food systems, workforce development, infrastructure and capacity, and of course, that word again, climate resiliency. I think it's really important on the climate front that what we look to do here in New York State is in alignment with what is happening at the federal level so that those funding streams and the technology that we're going to need are in harmony. As part of this, I'm kind of excited to report that New York State, we will host all commissioners, secretaries, and directors of agriculture from around the United States for their 2022 annual meeting, which is going to be in Saratoga Springs this year, September. I'm proud that other states look to New York in terms of ag policy and programs in a pretty big way. I also want to share some updates on a few things that we're talking about on the international front there. On trade, First of all, a lot of people's eyes glass over when we start talking about trade issues, but did you know that New York State exports 40% of what we produce? 40% of what we produce goes offshore. I was able to be at the Tri-National Accord this past September. The United States hosted that accord. This is a discussion between the ministers of agriculture in Canada, the secretaries of agriculture from the 32 states in Mexico, and all the commissioners, secretaries, and directors from the United States. We come together and we discuss trade issues, irritants, phytosanitary concerns, etc. I got to host that meeting in Washington this year. It was our turn. It rotates from country to country every year. Next year we'll be in Mexico. But clearly this was an important conversation to have this year with the USMCA just coming into force and with our concerns over dairy in Canada and our concerns over Mexico's thinking about genetics and pesticides. We need to come to terms and we need to understand that. More important, we signed the USMCA, which was an important document, and it improved what we had in NAFTA. The Tri-National Accord was actually set up when NAFTA was formed. But we need to stay on this. We need to make sure we're in harmony. Those two countries are our biggest trading partners. 25% of all our dairy exports go to Mexico, for example. So it's very important that we maintain those relationships, get to know those people, and continue those discussions. Back here at home and on the kind of exciting news front, we had really pretty amazing news yesterday from Albany when Governor Hochul, did I say that? When Governor Hochul delivered her State of the State address. She's been a very strong friend of agriculture over the years. I got to do an awful lot of things with her when she was lieutenant governor. She has visited dozens of farms across the state. She's been to my farm probably half a dozen times. She cares about agriculture. She understands the importance of the work that you all do and your contributions to our economy and to our community. Yesterday, it was pretty exciting to see her unveil a sweeping plan to support agriculture over the next few years. Programs, initiatives, investments unlike anything we've ever seen. It's truly an historic moment for our industry, and I think it comes at the right time as we continue to work through so many challenges today. Perhaps the biggest announcement made yesterday was the launch of significant new tax credits and the increase of existing ones meant to support food production in New York State. To help farms meet the latest challenges and offset rising costs, Governor Hochul will increase an existing workforce tax credit. She'll create a new one and also expand an investment tax credit. So here they are. Increasing the workforce retention tax credit. The state will double the yearly dollar fixed amount of the non-refundable tax credit per eligible employee and extend the program until 2025. The state will create a permanent refundable tax credit on overtime hours for any size farm in New York State. New York will increase the existing investment tax credit at year end for all farms of any size, allowing farmers to purchase that new equipment to help them further efficiencies and invest on their farms. Together, these efforts will help farms both support their workers and meet the food production goals that we have in New York State. Pretty exciting news. Maybe a round of applause here. I think another great boost to farmers and a success story in its own right in our state is the Farm to School program. This program has dedicated $6.8 million helping our schools to source local, healthy food from our farmers, which is good news for our farmers, good news for our students. But we can and we will and we must do better. Our students in every school district should know about agriculture, and they should be eating fresh fruits and vegetables provided by their local farmer. I'm proud that the governor announced a game-changing proposal in this area. To better connect schools and farmers and support local production, the state will transfer the administration of the National School Lunch Program from the State Education Department to the Department of Agriculture and Markets. That is pretty cool. Think about that. I think this is going to be a win for our farmers. I think it's going to be a win for our school children. We're going to work with the Department of Health to ensure that the nutrition standards are met. We're going to work with the Office of General Services to develop guidelines specific to school food procurement. I'm excited about the future of this program, what it's going to mean to agriculture, and I should add we're going to work very closely with the Department of Education and the commissioner there who supports this idea. I think this can be a game changer for us in the farm-to-school arena, so thank you. As we think about so many of the impacts of COVID, we know that the food supply chain was disrupted. Both ends of the food supply chain were hurt the worst, and we know that this had far-reaching effects in other areas of the industry as well. For example, COVID-19 pandemic caused daycares, including agribusiness child care development, the ABCD centers that many of you are familiar with. They had to temporarily close their doors, leaving our essential farm workers facing the same difficult choices that New Yorkers had when it came to balancing work and their children. Disproportionately, women had to step out of the ag workforce to care for those children. To support farm workers with child care needs, New York will increase support for ABCD centers statewide to continue to provide the highest quality early childhood education and social services to farm workers and other eligible families with infants, toddlers, and school. Additionally, capital investments at ABCD will create a safer environment, give the centers more capacity to serve more kids of essential workers. New York will also invest in increasing family programming at these centers. And I don't know if any of you have been to an ABCD. I always had trouble with that in school. But I think they're the most amazing places. The young people that get an opportunity to work at school and learning and then become productive members of society is amazing. I got to witness a graduation at an ABCD daycare center in Batavia. It was children who had gone to the Head Start program there and now were graduating college and continuing careers. And it was so emotional and so moving and so correct that this is a great effort that New York State takes on. As we examine the other impacts of COVID on the food supply chain, we've identified some areas that needed improvement. COVID shone a very bright light on the food supply chain, as you all know. In many cases, New Yorkers face difficulties in trying to access food in food deserts and traditionally underserved communities. To combat this, the governor will fund the Urban Farms and Community Grants program to help make local food accessible to more residents of New York, including those in food deserts, underserved communities, and at the same time encourage more urban farming. The state's also going to refund the Farmers Market Resiliency Grant program, establish a working group to connect upstate and downstate New York on food procurement and distribution. This has been talked about and worked on for years. Grant funding will give farmers and small businesses an opportunity to build resiliency into their markets, including maybe moving to online sales and delivery and investing in infrastructure to make local food accessible to more consumers. Of course, one of our greatest accomplishments during the pandemic has been creating several new programs that connect New York farmers directly with people and businesses who are struggling to find access to food. Our Nourish New York program has helped New York's food banks and emergency food providers purchase New York agricultural products and give them to New Yorkers in need. So far, over 48.4 million pounds of New York food products, roughly 40 million meals, have been purchased and distributed. That is an incredible success because it benefited both ends of the food chain, our farmers and those who are facing food insecurity. I'm excited that the governor recently signed the Nourish New York law permanently in the state, and I couldn't be prouder to see that program continue in 2022. This is connecting the dots at its best. To continue supporting farmers and feeding residents, the governor will fund the Nourish New York program annually. Through the collaboration of the Department of Ag and Markets and our Department of Health, the emergency food system will be providing additional funding to continue to purchase food from New York farmers and get it to people who need food. And building on that Nourish success, our restaurant resiliency program is another win-win-win for our agricultural community, for our restaurants, and for our families who need to put food on the table. Through this program, our food banks are working with hundreds of restaurants across the state to bring healthy meals to New Yorkers in need. Restaurants in the program are encouraged to use New York agricultural products, of course, providing a boost to our farmers. And we've seen some very delicious New York grown meals distributed in the program so far. Over 700,000 meals thus far, and we just began the program last month. Both Nourish New York and the Restaurant Resiliency Program are rooted in our food supply chain here in New York State. Since the very beginning of the program and this pandemic, we have focused our energy and our attention on ensuring that our food supply chain can continue uninterrupted. This consumed us in those first few months of the pandemic, but we rose. We saw firsthand the importance of having local, fresh foods readily available, whether at our grocery stores or at our farmers markets, and we know that our best course of action is always to rely on the foods being grown and produced right here in this state. So now we're also turning our attention to strengthening, streamlining our food supply chain so that we're ready for any challenging circumstances that come our way in the future. Along with our partners at Cornell and Empire State Development, we have convened a food supply working group to outline steps that we can take moving forward to strengthen the food supply chain's resiliency and self-reliance. This is great news for our farmers and for our ag community, and it's going to help us be stronger and healthier going forward. I would add that part of strengthening our food supply chain is supporting New York growers and food producers through our marketing programs. Programs like New York State Grown and Certified, programs like Taste New York. New York Grown and Certified now has more than 3,000 producers participating on over 750,000 acres. Grown and Certified farms have been a critical component to Nourish New York and our Farm to School program as well. We get more and more Grown and Certified products being added to school menus all across the state. For those of you who don't know, Grown and Certified, when you see that symbol on a package, you can see that symbol in our booth out here. It means three things. It means, number one, it's a New York farm. It means, number two, there's an environmental stewardship quality about that farm that we audit called our AIM program. And it means, number three, there's food safety, also audited program on that farm. So a consumer, whether they're retail, wholesale, mom, dad, the grocery store, they see that, they know it was grown by a New York farmer in an environmentally correct way with food safety practices. This is the only program of its kind in the United States. We recently showed off Grown and Certified and Taste New York at the New York Produce Show, the second largest produce show in the country, held at the Javits Center in New York City. And as always, it was a great day. Nonstop business opportunities for our produce industry, all the buyers from around the world, producers from around the world. Our pavilion featured associations and producer representatives like the New York Cider Association, the New York State Vegetable Growers Association, New York State Maple Producers Association, Long Island Farm Bureau, and others. And our staff were on hand to answer questions and promote Grown and Certified and Nourish New York and our Farm to School 30% reimbursement program. But the funnest part of the day for me was cutting the ribbon, and I had the honor to cut the ribbon on that show along with the New York State Teacher of the Year. Guess what? The New York State Teacher of the Year is an ag teacher from Cuba, Rushford, Carly Santangelo. That's a round of applause. It was coming to the big city from Cuba, for sure. But what an exciting moment. Got to introduce her to all our producers and to Manhattan. The New York State Grown and Certified program will also play a huge role in the brand new New York State Regional Food Hub in the South Bronx. Ask Pat Hooker about the Regional Food Hub in the South Bronx. How many years, how many commissioners have worked on this? I had the honor of touring the progress on this new state-of-the-art facility last month when we held a topping-off ceremony with many of the partners, including Grow NYC, Empire State Development, the New York City EDC, and others, while the final beam of the 60,000 square foot, 40 million cold storage facility was put in place. The New York State Regional Food Hub is a joint state and city project that, when complete, will strengthen their local food economy, support New York farmers, and improve access to healthy and affordable foods for low-income communities like the South Bronx. If you haven't been to the South Bronx, 30,000 people per square mile. My county has 30,000 people in it. The South Bronx has 30,000 people per square mile, and they don't have an opportunity to purchase New York food there. There are no farm markets, there's no grocery stores, there's only bodegas, and it's no wonder why they have the highest rate of juvenile diabetes and childhood obesity in the United States. Add to that some of the worst air quality anywhere in the country. This is connecting the dots at its best. You're all familiar with the great efforts of Taste New York. Our Taste New York staff and our store operators who worked one-on-one with producers throughout the pandemic continue to help folks pivot their business models, adjust to consumer needs as we go along. Looking ahead, we're going to be working with the New York State Thruway. You probably noticed every other Thruway stop is closed. They're redoing all of them. We're going to add more Taste New York products at each rest area, convenience store, and gift shops as they're redeveloped. And we also look to build on the successes of 2021, the Taste New York's activations, which included a new pop-up Taste New York market at the New York State Fair. And that was staffed by Welcome Center operators from each region and showcased products from over 80 farmers, food and beverage producers across the state. Speaking of the State Fair, we're pretty thankful that after a year off, the great New York State Fair was able to take place last summer. It was great to be back together at the historic fairgrounds and to safely have some fun, have some food, and have some festivities that I know, all missed in 2020. I'm also pretty excited that the governor has asked us to find opportunities to grow and revitalize all our fairs across the state. We're working with county fairs this year to increase their marketing and promotion opportunities. We're also focusing on helping all fairs, including the State Fair, get back to their agricultural roots. We want to improve youth and ag programming initiatives at fairs across the state and really show visitors and fair growers all the best that New York State agriculture has to offer. When we have the State Fair in a normal year, we have about 1.3 million people come. You have 1.3 million people in one place. We have an opportunity to talk to them, to give them a message about agriculture. We got to take advantage of that. Another great means of support for producers is our Dairy Promotion Order Advisory Board and our Milk Marketing Advisory Council. Tireless people, and that helps us continue to facilitate growth of the dairy industry in our state. Through the Milk Marketing Advisory Council, we continue to collaborate on the Dairy Think Tank. There's people in this room that are part of that think tank, which was formed to help us understand what we want the dairy industry to look like in 10 years, 15 years, and 20 years. This includes ways to expand consumer connections and also new business opportunities. The DPO, likewise, has also identified some great goals for 2022. These are great farmers, great minds, including the increased consumption of New York dairy by our young people and creating some marketing strategies that are socially diverse and inclusive. These are going to be key to moving our industry forward, and I look forward to seeing what they suggest next. Another program taking a step forward this year is our hemp program. We had some pretty exciting news just at the end of December. The department's hemp program plan was approved by USDA at the very end of 2021. And that allows us to continue in New York to administer a hemp grower licensing program. So starting right off January 1st in 2022, we are now accepting applications for the program, and we certainly look forward to our growers having the stability and consistency and regulations moving forward, and we'll continue to offer guidance and support there as well. At the end of last year, the former New York State Industrial Hemp Agricultural Research Pilot Program had nearly 800 registered growers and approximately 30,000 acres registered for growing industrial hemp. We're already seeing a very strong response in applicants for the new program, and we can see a pretty bright future ahead for the industry. I think there's a lot of potential here. The governor recognized that yesterday by announcing in her State of the State address a plan to bolster increased interest in the use of hemp for grain and for fiber by establishing a working group at the department that will coordinate activities of the state, the federal, and industry partners on workforce development, training needs, sampling, testing, research, and market opportunities. Additionally, New York State is going to continue supporting the work of Cornell in developing new commercial cultivars in grain, fiber, and CBD, as well as developing new processing technologies for industrial hemp. This is a commitment, and it's a multi-year commitment, and we have to stay strong. I'm also pretty optimistic about our efforts to effect positive change in our industry and about our goal to combat racial inequality. Since the publication of our Diversity and Racial Equity Workgroup report this summer, and for those of you who can think back, we put together this work group after we saw the NASS data come out in the last statistics at USDA. And it showed that the number of farmers in the state was shifting, small farms, largely predictable things that you could have seen coming. A couple things we didn't see coming. One good thing was more women on farms. That was largely because they began counting women on farms. They only were able to count one operator on a farm. We all know that that's not the way farms work. So they began to more accurately count women, and we found that number, women, and we found that number was great. But disturbing was to see that black, minority, people of color, farmers was going down. Why is that? We pulled together a work group to dive into that. We listened for 2 years. I want to emphasize that we listened for 2 years. And we issued a report this past summer. I've heard from other states who have looked at our report. I've been inspired by the conversations that we've had in the work group and by conversations, frankly, that we've had with Washington on the same subject. I spent some time this summer. I visited Buffalo Go Green Incorporated, Urban Fruits and Veggies, Big Dream Farm, and the Vineyard Farms to see firsthand what they were facing. Their contributions to the community is amazing. This is a great opportunity for continued learning, continued sharing, and we hope that the perspective we gain from these visits is going to help us continue to move this forward. Pretty proud of the work we accomplished together with our work group members. I know there's still an awful lot to do, and it's an urgent challenge. We've identified some of those that need to be identified. As we look ahead to the new year and to new policy opportunities, we are going to be establishing the BIPOC Farmer Engagement and Outreach Program to support unique needs of BIPOC farmers and producers from across the state. The governor announced this plan yesterday. It made it to her State of the State address as part of her commitment to diversity and equity in New York agriculture. This is vital. That's going to include taking input and feedback from the Diversity and Racial Equity Work Group that we established back in 2019 at the Department of Ag and Markets, listening to external stakeholders, helping to build an ongoing and sustainable relationship between farmers of color and the department, providing a direct phone number, email address to connect our staff here at the department and help navigate the various services, providers, resources that are available to underrepresented groups in agriculture. I think this is the first step to help expand farming opportunities to more New Yorkers, especially those who are in historically marginalized groups. But once again, I urge everyone today to have those conversations in your own community. I encourage you to commit to recognize the struggle of BIPOC farmers and to take actions towards inclusivity and equity in your own community. A more diverse industry will make us better and stronger, especially as we continue to build back from the continued challenges of COVID. USDA has a bad record here. The Farm Service Agency has a bad record here. But I think together with this report and with this initiative and with this dedication first to listening, we can make good progress. But I encourage you, have those conversations in your community. Along with issues of diversity and racial equity, one of the biggest challenges that we must tackle as an industry, as a nation, as a globe, is climate change. You saw that today. You dedicated this meeting to that today. This has been a very big year for climate discussions. It is the theme here, rightfully so. There is perhaps no greater issue facing us all collectively that we will have a more sweeping impact on our future. I'm proud to say that we as a state are really not resting in this regard. We're taking action, and we're doing something about mitigating the effects of climate change. As farmers, We're used to dealing with the weather, but nothing like what we have faced in recent memory. Several years ago, we all dealt with one of the worst droughts the state has ever faced. I was all over the state looking at potatoes the size of marbles and 5-year-old trees that were dead. And then the following year, we had the wettest year on record. On my own farm, I have seen 4 100-year events and a 500-year event just in the last 25 years. As part of the nation-leading Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, I get to chair the Agriculture and Forestry Advisory Panel, and I get to be a member of the New York State Climate Action Council. I'm proud to be at that table in these discussions because agriculture has an important role in achieving climate goals in New York State. You've got members here that are on that Ag and Forest Advisory Panel, John Noble, Suzanne Hunt. You saw them on this panel up here. Brian is my right arm on that group. So you have input there. That Ag and Forestry Advisory Work Panel convened 10 times. We worked very hard. We spent a lot of hours at each meeting from August through March of 2021. The charge to the panel was to develop a comprehensive set of recommendations for how the agriculture and forestry communities can not only reduce emissions, but also play a key role in the state's net zero goal by 2050. Enhancing land-based carbon sequestration through forest management, reforestation, agroforestry, and soil health is central to the emission target set by the Clcpa. The panel was diverse, but we reached consensus on the recommendations, and they're contained in the draft scoping plan. At the December 20 meeting, the Climate Action Council, that is, the council voted to release the draft scoping plan for public comment. You heard that talked about in the panel today. I encourage all of you to go to the website, climate.ny.gov, view the scoping plan, and provide your input. This is your opportunity to provide the input. So pay attention, sit up straight, scope it, and help us with that. In addition, through our partnerships with the New York State Soil and Water Conservation Committee, our county soil and water conservation districts, along with our programs at the department like Climate Resilient Farming Grant Program, we're working to help our farmers better handle the effects of these severe weather events. At the same time, we're able to incorporate best practices to mitigate the impact of agriculture on climate change. The good news is in agriculture, we have a head start on all this because over the last few decades, we've been working on implementing good management practices for the purpose of environmental quality, for water and air quality. These same practices that we had in place can help us with carbon sequestration and helping improve emissions of climate gases. There's an increasing demand for climate mitigation, obviously. The need for resilience, the need for adaptation options from New York's 34,000 farms. New York State has provided funding through the Climate Resilient Farming Program for several years to help assist more than 200 New York farms reduce their operational impact on the environment and to address issues around extreme weather events that result from climate change. But the CRF grant program has been oversubscribed every year since it started by over 50%. So to meet the growing need for funding in this area and to help keep farms adapting to climate change, the governor announced an incredible investment to increase money for the CRF program and its associated supportive initiatives. This action is going to help us advance New York efforts to reduce agricultural greenhouse gases and to advance on-farm community-wide resiliency methods. Additionally, expanded CRF funding can help access key opportunities for mitigation, resilience, and adaptation beyond the current program offerings that we have. These opportunities have emerged through evolving applied research, which was funded through the program's budget and conducted by Cornell University. I think you heard today in the panel and question and answer period that there's going to be technologies and methods that haven't even been invented yet, so we got to keep the foot down on the research. So New York State is without a doubt a leader in fighting climate change, and agriculture is committed and also able to be a part of the solution. With this funding commitment, we can reach more farms and make an even greater impact as environmental stewards. When I think about the work that the Transportation Work Group panel has to do, when I think about the work that the energy production panel has to achieve. When I think about the work that the waste panel, the housing panel has to achieve, I look at our opportunities in agriculture. We're a part of the answer. We're not just a part of being less of a problem. We can be a part of the answer, and we need to pay attention. When I wrapped up the virtual State of the Agriculture address last year in 2021, I reflected on some of the unexpected silver linings that I saw that the pandemic brought to the industry. That year, our state came together, and I saw a renewed emphasis on buying local foods and supporting local businesses, and on appreciating our food systems and the essential workers that help to put food on our tables in all corners of the state. Now, as we begin 2022, I'm glad that those lessons didn't fade, and instead I think we have an opportunity to have them take hold in our culture, especially recently with so much talk about the supply chain, delays and shipping of all kinds of products, and I've continued to hear an emphasis on looking inward, looking at home. People are buying from their local farmers, they're shopping at their local farm stands and grocery stores. People are still supporting their neighbors, they're still working together. I'm heartened to see that this didn't end as we endured a second year of COVID, and now perhaps the third. Even as we continue to face these challenges, this is a positive outcome that we can all focus on. We learned from COVID that the need here in New York for a resilient and a responsive food supply chain right here in New York is so critical. New York does not want to find itself looking outside our borders to other regions, to other countries for our food supply chain needs in the event of another pandemic. As Norman Borlaug, another one of my heroes, winner of the Nobel Prize, observed, the first essential component of social justice is adequate food for mankind. For those of you who don't know Norman, he was a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. He's since established the World Food Prize laureate program. Even though only 1% of us are involved in production agriculture, we still need to continue to feed the other 99%. There's tremendous power in doing the right thing, and that is the right thing. We in New York have great resources, good land, access to water, great farmers, some of the best in the country, the best land grant system for ag education. We have the ability to grow and rank in the top 10 of over 30 commodities nationally, and we have the opportunity to participate in the world's 13th largest economy right here in New York State. It's incumbent upon us to continue to do that and to feed our world. Our agricultural community faces challenges every day, from weather to markets and more. You heard Pat Hooker mention heroes today. You've proven yourselves to be essential in the face of great challenge. And essential means that you're heroes. Heroes look like ordinary people, but they do extraordinary things. They help people without strings attached. They take responsibility for their own lives and others. And we need them now more than ever. We must continue our work because this generation, this next generation needs heroes now more than ever. We in this room are uniquely positioned to come together. We can affect positive change at a scale that only a few people can imagine. We have in this room, I think, the mindset, I think the sense of purpose, I think the sense of urgency, and I think the will to ensure that agriculture remains viable in New York State for this generation and for those to come. Ours is a noble profession, and our cause is still correct. I like our chances, and I certainly look forward to working with you to build on our hard-won successes and continuing the work. Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to be at this family reunion once again. Thanks for being a good group.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate your remarks as always. It's a highlight of our event. Only a few things in closing. I am humbled and honored to be here with you all today, and I think you all know why. Excited that we were able to pull off a safe, informative forum. I wanted to thank a few people again. Without these folks, this wouldn't happen, and if I leave somebody out, it's not on purpose. But the planning committee, led by Peter Pamkowski, the program committee, led by Chris Kelder, and the everything committee, led by Ann Noble-Shepard. Without those folks and those leadership, we wouldn't be here. This was our 190th forum. We're looking forward to the 191st next year. We're excited to partner with the folks on the committee to find another topic and hopefully be here again a year from now. We have a special reception, which means free food and drinks outside, which is kind of fun, that we'd love to have you join us and meet the exhibitors and continue to connect and network with each other. Again, if you hadn't had the opportunity to introduce yourself to the ambassadors, please find them over this time frame. If you haven't had a time to connect and challenge the current lead class, please do the same thing. Thanks again for spending a day with us. Thanks.